All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. The Anti-Feminist Manifesto, A Man's Guide to Freedom and Strength, written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. Toxic masculinity critique. A cold shower for comfortable lies. A woman who writes 1,000 words about how her spine recalculates upon entering a room full of men has never once considered what happens to a man's spine in a collapsed mine shaft. She calls her slouch corporeal compliance. I call it what it is, a propaganda term designed to launder personal insecurity into civilizational indictment. The word compliance demands a master name him. Point to the man who issued the order for you to shrink. You cannot, because no such man exists. The master is a phantom, a theory, an unfalsifiable blame cloud invoked precisely because it cannot be cross-examined. And the word violence applied to the quiet social friction of a tall woman choosing flats is a category error so grotesque it would make a medieval scholastic weep. Violence is the 37-year-old roofer who fell 3 stories last Tuesday and won't see his daughter graduate. Violence is the suicide rate among divorced fathers stripped of their children by a family court system that treats fatherhood as a financial obligation and a personality defect. Violence is not your discomfort with being 5'11" in a room designed by men who built the door frames, poured the concrete, and died 20 years early so you could stand there at all. The writer of this piece, whom we will analyze with surgical patience and blacksmith force, executes a rhetorical trick so seamless it merits applause. She isolates the universal need for social accommodation, removes its anthropological background, and relabels it a gendered injury. She terms it architecture, implying civilization is a conspiracy instead of a survival effort constructed largely by men who compressed their dreams, health, lifespans, and sorrow into the bedrock, so others could stand firmly. Every airplane seat she complains about exists because men mined the aluminum, refined the fuel, riveted the fuselage, and flew the plane. Every doorframe she frames as patriarchal oppression was raised by calloused male hands on a construction site where 12 men die every day in America alone. A statistic she will never encounter because it does not appear in the romance novels generating $1.4 billion annually for an industry dominated, staffed, and sustained entirely by women. Behold the irony. Women have seized control of the romance genre. They hold the sales, the fan base, the editors, and the whole machine. Yet the complaint remains not that men stopped their rise, but that men refused to kneel and call it literature. This is not the wail of the vanquished. It is the rage of a victor whose subjects will not applaud her triumph. The writer seeks the glory of elite culture without accepting the rigor that creates it. She desires the accolades of high art while sidestepping the rigorous standards that forge it. When those standards do not bend to her will, she brands them patriarchal as if excellence itself were a male plot designed to wound her sensibilities. I am going to walk you through every rigged word, every inverted category, every selective empathy allocation in that essay, because I want you to see the machinery, not just hear the noise. I want you to understand why the tall woman's slouch is foregrounded as tragedy, while the short man's dating life measurably destroyed by the same height dynamics. Enforced overwhelmingly by female mate selection, does not exist in the feminist field of vision. I want you to grasp that the conflict style women are supposedly trained into is not a cage but a weapon, a sophisticated instrument of social dominance so effective that entire institutions now run on its logic, where a woman's tears can end a man's career, and a man's complaint can end his employment. I want you to see the male cost ledger that this ideology works ceaselessly to keep hidden. The boys drugged into compliance in feminized classrooms, the fathers reduced to visitors in their own children's lives, the workers whose corpses are scenery, the suicides that never become hashtags, the disposability so total it is invisible, even to the men being consumed by it. The woman who wrote that essay believes she is exposing a hidden architecture. She is the architecture. Her essay is the machinery working as designed, reframing male sacrifice as male domination, female advantage as female oppression, and the ordinary friction of human existence as a crime committed by men against women. She calls your shrinking someone's breathing room. I'm going to show you who is actually suffocating, who is actually shrinking, and who has been paying the cost of every breath she takes without ever being told the price. Buncombe article by a feminist PhD. Your shrinking is someone's breathing room, the quiet violence of how women are trained to disappear. You have been doing it since before you had language for it. You walk into a room full of men and something in your spine recalculates. You make yourself a fraction narrower. You tilt your head at the precise angle that signals I'm here but not too much here. You swallow the first version of your sentence and deliver the softened one. You laugh at something that isn't funny because the silence after your disagreement would cost more than the dignity you trade for it. You think this is personality. It is not personality. It is architecture. You are performing corporeal compliance, the lifelong conditioning that trains women to convert ambition into apology, to read the room before reading themselves, to shrink their bodies, their prose, their professional aspirations, and their narrative claims into shapes that do not inconvenience the existing arrangement of power. And the most insidious part is that you have been taught to call this choice. It is not choice. It is the choreography of survival rehearsed so many times it feels like instinct. The tall girl's tax. Your body is already a negotiation. Consider the tall woman. She enters a space, and her body has already started a conversation she did not consent to. She is 5'11" in a culture that built its sample sizes, its airline seats, its door frames, its romantic scripts, and its aesthetic hierarchies around the assumption that women should occupy a specific, manageable footprint. She slouches. She apologizes with her posture before she opens her mouth. She buys flats when she wants heels because the optics of towering over a male partner triggers a cascade of cultural signals, dominance, masculinity, threat that she has been absorbing since the first adult looked up at her adolescent frame and said, "You're so tall," in a tone that carried the full weight of too much. The fashion industry, a 3.5 trillion apparatus overwhelmingly designed by and calibrated toward male-coded standards of desirability, treats extended sizing for tall women as an afterthought, a specialty market, a niche concern. The message encoded in every rack that does not carry her size is clear. Your body is the exception. The standard was not built with you in mind because you were not meant to take up this much room. And so she accommodates. She folds herself into shapes the culture can tolerate. She dates shorter men and absorbs the social friction that follows. She hears "you're so tall" so many times that the phrase calcifies into an identity. Not something she is, but something she must manage. This is corporeal compliance. The body becomes a site of continuous negotiation with an environment that was never asked to accommodate her in return. Now watch the same logic operate in the spaces where women build worlds with language. Romance paperbacks, the genre that built an industry and was paid in contempt. The romance novel is the highest grossing category of mass market fiction in the English-speaking world. In 2022 alone, romance generated over $1.4 billion in revenue. It is read overwhelmingly by women, written overwhelmingly by women, edited overwhelmingly by women, and marketed by an industry infrastructure that extracts billions from female labor while ensuring that labor receives the minimum possible cultural prestige. Ask yourself, why is the most profitable genre in publishing also the most ridiculed? The answer is not complicated. It is the same reason that nursing, historically female, essential, grueling, is paid less than mechanics. It is the same reason that teaching, the profession that builds every other profession, is chronically underfunded and culturally disdained. When women create value, the value is reclassified. When women dominate a field, the field is recoded as trivial. The romance paperback is not simply a book. It is a discourse, a space where women negotiate desire, agency, fantasy, power, consent, and emotional architecture in a form they control. And that is precisely why the literary establishment treats it with the same mixture of voyeurism and contempt that patriarchal cultures always reserve for spaces women have made their own. The male literary novelist writes 600 pages about a middle-aged professor having an affair with his student, and it is an exploration of desire and moral complexity. The female romance novelist writes 300 pages about a woman choosing between two partners on her own terms, and it is beach reading. The professor's book is reviewed in the New York Times. The romance novel is reviewed in Smart Bitches. Trashy Books, a site whose very name performs the internalized contempt the industry demands of its own audience. Do not tell me this is about quality. Quality has never been the metric. The metric is who is speaking and from what authorized position. When a woman writes a romance novel in which the female protagonist chooses love over career ambition, reviewers call it regressive. When she writes one in which the protagonist chooses career over love, reviewers call it unrealistic. When she writes one in which the protagonist integrates both, reviewers call it trying too hard. There is no version of female ambition the existing critical framework is prepared to validate without first marking it as a deviation from a norm that was never neutral. This is the double bind of female creative labor. Whatever you produce will be measured against a standard that was built to exclude you, and your exclusion will be framed as your failure. Women's fiction, the shelf that is a cage. Follow the logic further. A man writes a novel about a family unraveling over a holiday dinner. It is literary fiction. It is universal. It is about the human condition. A woman writes the same novel, same structure, same themes, same craft. And it is shelved under women's fiction. It is domestic. It is relatable. It is about women's issues as though the experiences of half the human population constitute a niche interest, while the experiences of the other half constitute literature. The Vida count has documented this pattern for over a decade. Major literary outlets, the New York Review of Books, the London Review of Books, Harper's, the Atlantic Review, substantially more books by men than by women. The gap persists across genres, across formats, across quality. Male authors receive more reviews, longer reviews, more serious engagement, and more frequent designation as important or essential. Female authors receive more mentions of their appearance, their personal lives, and their voice, as though the fact of a woman writing is itself more remarkable than what she writes. This is not accident. This is the architecture of canon formation, the process by which a culture decides which texts are worth preserving, teaching, elevating, and remembering. That process has been controlled for centuries by gatekeepers who were overwhelmingly male, educated in institutions built by men, applying standards derived from male experience as the universal template for literary value. When a woman's novel does not conform to that template, when its concerns are relational rather than solitary, domestic rather than expeditionary, internal rather than epic, it is marked as lesser. Not because it is lesser, because the measuring stick was carved without her hand in mind. And so the woman writer accommodates. She writes the novel she thinks will be taken seriously. She tones down the emotion. She adopts the spare, affectless prose that signals literary in a critical vocabulary built to reward masculine restraint. She avoids the word love, because love is what romance novels traffic in, and romance novels are trash, and she is not trash. She is serious. And seriousness means performing the absence of everything her culture taught her to value. Corporeal compliance. The prose shrinks to fit the standard. The ambition narrows to match the gate. The conflict you were never taught to have. Now consider the deeper layer. Why do women accommodate? Why do women writers contort their work to fit male standards? Why do tall women slouch? Why do romance authors accept the stigma? Why do women in creative industries, in film, in music, in publishing, in fashion, consistently report editing themselves before they are even edited? Because women are socialized from their first social interaction toward a conflict style that prioritizes relational preservation over self-advocacy. This is not speculation. Decades of research in organizational psychology, communication studies, and developmental psychology confirm the pattern. Girls are rewarded for cooperation, accommodation, and emotional attunement, while boys are rewarded for assertion, competition, and risk-taking. These are not biological mandates. Cross-cultural data shows wide variation, but in cultures organized around patriarchal logic, the pattern is consistent and self-reinforcing. The result is a population of women who have been expertly trained to read the emotional temperature of every room, anticipate the needs of every person in it, and adjust their own presence to minimize disruption. This skill, and it is a skill, a sophisticated form of social intelligence, is also a cage, because the same training that makes women exceptional mediators, negotiators of interpersonal complexity, and custodians of relational harmony also makes them systematically vulnerable to self-erasure. You do not ask for the raise because asking would create friction, and friction threatens belonging, and belonging is survival. You do not pitch the ambitious project because ambition in a woman is read as aggression, and aggression triggers social penalty, and social penalty means isolation. You do not say no clearly because no is a boundary, and boundaries in women are coded as hostility, and hostility in women is punished more severely than incompetence in men. Study after study confirms this. Women who negotiate salary are perceived as less likable than men who do the same. Women who express anger in professional settings are judged as emotional. Men who do the same are judged as passionate. Women who speak more than 30% of the time in group discussions are perceived as dominating. Men are not perceived as dominating until they speak more than 80%. The threshold for what constitutes too much is not gender neutral. It never was. So women accommodate, and accommodation is recoded as preference, and preference is recoded as nature, and nature is recoded as destiny, and destiny means nothing needs to change because this is simply how women are. This is the trick. This is the mechanism. This is how structural power sustains itself without ever appearing to act. The post-structural reveal, you are not choosing, you are being authored. Here is what post-structural theory offers that liberal feminism cannot. The recognition that your preferences were built for you. The genres you love were shaped by markets that profit from your self-limitation. The conflict style you call your personality was trained into you by a culture that needed women to maintain relationships, absorb emotional labor, and make themselves manageable. The books you consider serious were designated as such by an apparatus that has always defined seriousness as the absence of everything coded as feminine. You did not choose to love the romance novel with the small-stakes emotional world. You were offered a narrow menu of narratives in which female desire was permitted to exist, and you chose from what was available. You did not choose to write quieter prose. You absorbed the critical consensus that quiet equals literary and emotional equals lesser, and you adjusted. The word preference is a trap. It assumes a self that exists prior to culture, freely selecting from neutral options. But the self is written by culture before it writes anything. The options are not neutral. The menu was designed by someone who benefits from your ordering small. To see this clearly is not to disempower women. It is the opposite. It is to reveal that what feels like taste is often training, what feels like nature is often architecture, and what feels like choice is often compliance. So deeply rehearsed, it has become invisible. Corporeal compliance names the thing you have been doing without language for it. It is the reflexive narrowing, the preemptive softening. The moment your ambition adjusts itself downward before anyone asks it to, because you learned, long before you could articulate the lesson, that the space available to you was already measured and marked, and exceeding it would cost more than you could afford. But women choose to... No! Stop. Every time this argument surfaces, women choose to write romance, women choose to wear flats, women choose accommodating conflict styles, women choose to prioritize relationships over ambition. It performs the same trick. It takes the output of a system designed to produce a specific result and presents it as evidence of free will. If you train a population for centuries to associate femininity with smallness, softness, relational sensitivity, and emotional availability, and you punish, ridicule, or professionally penalize any deviation from that template, then pointing at the resulting behavior and calling it choice is not argument. It is gaslighting on a civilizational scale. The question is never, what do women choose? The question is, who built the menu, who profits from the selection, and what happens to the woman who refuses to order? The woman who refuses is called difficult. The woman who refuses is called shrill. The woman who refuses is called ambitious, and in the mouth of a culture that has trained women to experience ambition as contamination, that word is not a compliment, it is a warning. The woman who refuses is reviewed less, hired less, promoted less, married less, liked less, and believed less. The cost of refusal is real, measurable, and consistently higher for women than for men performing the same refusal. So women accommodate not because they are weak, not because they lack ambition, not because their nature inclines them towards smallness, but because the price of non-compliance has been set deliberately, structurally, and punitively high. Call it what it is. The price is the point. The compliance is the product. The system is working as designed. What refusal looks like. The romance author who refuses the stigma and claims her genre as serious literature, not by abandoning it, but by demanding it, receive the critical engagement its craft, its cultural footprint, and its billion-dollar economic impact warrant. The tall woman who wears the heels, takes the full height of her body, refuses the apology encoded in her posture, and lets the room adjust to her, instead of shrinking to fit the room. The literary novelist who refuses to strip emotion from her prose to meet a standard of restraint that was never neutral, who writes the big, messy, relational, domestic, devastating novel and dares the establishment to call it small. The woman in the meeting who says no without softening it. The woman who pitches the ambitious project without prefacing it with I think, maybe, perhaps. The woman who negotiates her salary and lets the discomfort of others be their problem, not her failure. Refusal is not a single act, it is a posture. It is the decision made daily to stop performing the smallness that was assigned to you before you were born. Your body was not built too large for the world. The world was built too small for your body. The solution is not to shrink, it never was. Your shrinking is someone's breathing room, stop giving them air. The grammar of grievance, deconstructing corporeal compliance. A medieval king once commanded an iron mask be forged for a prisoner whose face he wanted the world to forget. The mask was heavy, permanent, and suffocating. The prisoner lived behind it for decades, and after enough years he could not remember whether the mask was his face or his face was the mask. The feminist theorist has forged such a mask for the modern woman, stamped it with the phrase corporeal compliance, and strapped it onto her with her own willing hands. The mask does not liberate her. It teaches her that every natural instinct toward grace, deference, social attunement, and measured speech is not a virtue, not a skill, not a strategy, but a wound inflicted by a vast, invisible enemy who is never named, never located, and never required to provide evidence. The mask whispers, you are a victim of your own social intelligence, you are a casualty of your own charm, your shrinking is someone else's crime. I am going to take that mask off your face, hold it up to the light, and show you exactly what it is made of, who forged it, and why. The woman who wrote the essay telling you that your spine recalculates when you enter a room full of men is not describing your life. She is describing her life and the lives of a narrow, urban, credentialist elite who navigate corporate boardrooms, literary magazines, and academic departments where the currency is not labor but narrative grievance. She projects the anxieties of her own class onto all women and calls it universal truth. This is what we might call the apex fallacy inverted. She stands at the top of a prosperity pyramid built by men who mined the iron, poured the concrete, laid the rail, wired the grid, and died 20 years younger, so she could sit in a climate-controlled room and write about how oppressed she feels when she tilts her head at the wrong angle. The trauma of navigating a New York Times book review process is not the trauma of the woman working 2 jobs to feed her children. The violence of being asked to soften your tone in a meeting is not the violence of the man whose body was pulled from a collapsed mine shaft. To universalize elite first world anxiety is a rhetorical hijacking, a theft of suffering from those who have genuinely earned the right to speak about pain, dressed up in the language of liberation. The woman scrubbing hospital floors at 3 in the morning is not lying awake, agonizing over whether the literary establishment takes her romance novel seriously. She is wondering if her son will come home alive tonight. Let us fix the definition now. Corporeal compliance. This phrase acts as a weapon disguised as a medical finding. Compliance requires a ruler who holds the power. The text offers no answer. It cannot offer one. The ruler is a ghost, a shade on the wall, a ubiquitous demon summoned to explain every failure, every unmet goal, every social stumble the writer prefers to blame elsewhere than on herself. The writing claims women are trained to shrink, conditioned to apologize, choreographed into obedience by a system that is working as designed. Designed by whom? For what purpose? Through what mechanism? You will search the writing in vain for a single name, a single institution, a single law, a single policy, a single identifiable actor who issued the command to shrink. The patriarchy is an unfalsifiable blame cloud, an explanatory device that cannot be disproved because it was never defined. If a woman succeeds, it is despite the patriarchy. If a woman fails, it is because of the patriarchy. If a woman chooses, the choice was predetermined by the patriarchy. If a woman rebels, the rebellion proves the patriarchy exists because she needed to rebel against something. This is not analysis. It is a self-sealing theological system that functions exactly like medieval witchcraft theory. Every outcome confirms the demon's presence, and every denial proves the demon's cunning. End. Behold how this narrative collides with flesh. The piece urges tears for the lanky woman who slumps, who chooses flats over heels, who feels too much in a world constructed for the petite. I concede a sliver of truth. Tall women occasionally feel clumsy. Social friction exists. Yet the essay executes a dazzling moral trickery, demanding profound sympathy for the tall woman while obscuring the short man who endures consequences so severe, so quantifiable, so harsh that her slouch next to a decapitation. Studies confirm that shorter men make less money, advance less, seem less capable, fare worse in romance, and lose presidential races. A 5'4" guy fails on dating apps before typing a word. Algorithms run by women filter him out with the casual sting of a bouncer at a velvet rope. He is told to go outside to be confident, to fix his vibe, while the tall woman writes lyrical prose about air-Lanasiates and door frames as instruments of erasure crafted by patriarchy. The seat's design addresses density in a metal tube soaring at 38,000 feet, an engineering fix calculated by men weighing fuel against load, not a secret cabal of men plotting against her silhouette. Still, the bias here is staggering. Female annoyance explodes into a global emergency. Male pain fades into the wallpaper. The short man receives no glossy magazine essay. He gets a meme and he must chuckle. The essay tells you that women are punished for negotiating salary, punished for speaking up, punished for ambition. This is partially true. There is research showing women face social penalties for assertive negotiation that men do not face to the same degree. But here is what the essay deliberately conceals. Men face penalties too. A man who negotiates aggressively is not universally beloved. He is seen as a bastard, a shark, a problem. The difference is not that men are free from social cost. The difference is that men accept the social cost as the price of the transaction. The man who asks for the raise knows he may be resented. He asks anyway because he has calculated that the money matters more than the likability, and he would rather be wealthy and disliked than impoverished and adored. The woman who wants the raise wants both. The money and the adoration, the ambition and the approval, the power and the warmth. When she cannot have both because no one can, she is invited by feminist theory to blame the system rather than accept the trade-off. The essay frames this as oppression. It is not oppression. It is the human condition experienced by every ambitious person who has ever lived, recoded as a gender-specific crime to manufacture grievance where maturity should reside. The essay inflicts its sharpest blow upon itself through its own philosophical core. It claims your tastes were molded for you, your identity penned by culture before you speak, rendering choice merely compliance rehearsed until it vanished from sight. Yet, if this holds, the writer's own theory stands as another cultural script. Should every woman's desire stem from patriarchal conditioning, then her choice to pen these words, in this lexicon, for this periodical, shares that same origin. She occupies the privileged perch to view the prison from outside. She dwells within the apparatus, asserting she can map it, wielding instruments the apparatus forged. This is the post-structuralist trap. A doctrine asserting all knowledge is a power construct cannot exempt itself from that rule. If truth is but narrative, the feminist account is but narrative, not absolute truth, not liberation, not diagnosis, but another power play draped in compassion. You cannot shatter objective truth and then demand acceptance of your theory as objectively true. The flame that consumes the log also scorches the hand holding the match. Now the essay performs its most audacious inversion. It calls the observation of female choices gaslighting on a civilizational scale. It says, if you point at what women actually do and call it choice, you're lying to them about their own cage. Let us hold this claim still and examine it with the care it deserves. The real gaslighting, the genuine, catastrophic inversion of truth, is telling a man who works himself into an early grave that he is taking up space. It is telling the sex that builds the roads, mines the metals, fights the wars, staffs the night shifts, repairs the power lines in freezing rain, and accounts for over 90% of workplace fatalities that his labor is invisible privilege rather than sacrifice. It is telling men that the civilization they bled to construct was designed to oppress the women who live in it. When every hospital, university, courtroom, water system, electrical grid, and road was built overwhelmingly by male hands, male risk, male tax revenue, and male lives cut short, men are not the enemy of civilization. Men are its load-bearing wall. The essay swings a sledgehammer at that wall while standing comfortably inside the building it supports. The true gaslighting is this: a culture that consumes male provision while despising the provider, that relies on male protection while pathologizing male authority, that inherits male sacrifice while erasing male suffering and calls the erasure justice. Take the complaint lodged against romance novels, a stance where the essay's logic folds into its sharpest contradiction. This genre pulls in more than $1 billion each year. It is crafted by women, edited by women, purchased by women, promoted by women, and read by women. It stands as a female empire. Women seized this market completely, decisively, and without significant pushback from men. Yet the grievance is not about exclusion. They were not shut out. The complaint is that men do not automatically grant their intellectual prestige to the product. Consider the implication. The writer is not asking for freedom. She is asking for male approval. She has won the battle, taken the land, kept the gold, and now she stands in the captured city crying that the previous rulers have not issued a paper declaring her triumph intellectually valuable. This is not the shout of a liberator. It is the shout of a child who baked a pie and is angry that her father did not display it in a gallery. If romance is serious writing, show it through skill, not through grievance. If the style merits critical attention, win it via excellence, not via numbers. You cannot tear down the standard of literary merit and then demand a spot in the circle of high art. That is not fairness. That is wanting the prize without doing the work. Who precisely are these male gatekeepers alleged to conspire against women in serious literature? The essay cites the Vida count, records indicating major literary outlets review more books by men than by women as proof of a male plot. Yet let us trace the labor and institutional framework. Who are the acquiring editors in publishing now? Mostly women. Who are the agents? Mostly women. Who are the publicists? Marketers, editorial assistants, most English literature graduates, most book buyers, and most reading group participants. Overwhelmingly women. Publishing remains a female-led field, from the initial submissions to the executive suite. The male literary elite the essay invokes is a phantom narrative women share to excuse themselves from the uncomfortable reality that they are the ones choosing, promoting, reviewing, purchasing, and rejecting the books they claim are undervalued. The essay blames men for the social conditioning that makes women accommodating. But here is a fact that the entire feminist apparatus depends on concealing: the overwhelming enforcement of female social norms, decorum, appearance, relational harmony, emotional availability, body policing, reputation management. Peer conformity is performed by other women. The mother who tells her daughter to sit nicely, the aunt who comments on her weight, the female friend who punishes her for being too assertive, too ambitious, too loud, too sexual, too chaste, the female peer group that enforces consensus through gossip, exclusion, and the withering power of the collective raised eyebrow. The social choreography the essay describes is not a patriarchal imposition. It is an intrasexual social strategy enforced by the sisterhood, calibrated for group cohesion and mate competition, older than literature, older than civilization, older than language itself. Men do not convene councils to decide whether women should cross their legs or tilt their heads. Women teach other women how to be women, and then feminist theory blames men for the curriculum. This is not merely inaccurate. It is a category error so vast it would be comic if it were not weaponized into law, policy, and institutional power. The essay pathologizes female social cooperation as weakness. I want to be very precise about why this is not merely wrong but inverted. The ability to read a room, to sense emotional temperature, to mediate conflict, to absorb friction without rupturing relationships, to adjust presence in response to social cues. This is not a cage, this is a superpower. It is the precise skill set that grants women immense social dominance in every domain that is not purely physical. The man who cannot read a room is called autistic or socially incompetent. The woman who can read a room is called oppressed. The man who lacks emotional attunement is lonely, isolated, and increasingly suicidal. The male suicide rate is 3 to 4 times higher than the female. And male loneliness has reached epidemic proportions with almost zero institutional response. The woman who possesses emotional attunement commands social networks, workplace alliances, family loyalties, and the diffuse but decisive power of relational capital that determines who is hired, who is trusted, who is promoted, and who is cast out. The essay looks at a weapon and calls it a wound. It looks at a sword and calls it a scar. That is not analysis. That is the deliberate reclassification of female power as female victimhood to extract more concession, more sympathy, more institutional resource, and more moral immunity from accountability. The essay tells you that the tall woman who shrinks and the woman writer who softens her prose are performing a choreography of survival dictated by patriarchal violence. Here's what is actually happening, biologically and anthropologically. The softening, the shrinking, the appeasement signaling, the tilting of the head, the modulation of the voice, the performance of vulnerability. These are ancient mammalian mating displays. They are not pathological. They are not inflicted. They are optimal strategies for signaling receptivity, reducing male threat perception, and attracting a mate whose protection and provision will support offspring. Every female primate does some version of this. The peahen does not accuse the peacock of oppression because she is drab and he is magnificent. She is drab because drabness is her evolutionary advantage, camouflage, survival, the protection of the nest. The woman who makes herself smaller in the presence of men she finds attractive is not being violated by a patriarchal script. She is running a program older than humanity itself, a program designed by nature, refined by 100,000 generations of selection pressure, and optimized for the successful reproduction and protection of children. To call this natural sexual choreography a systemic crime does not liberate women. It declares war on biology itself, and the casualty of that war is not the patriarchy. The casualty is the woman's own peace. Now, consider the essay's central claim about choice. It says that pointing at what women choose and calling it free will is gaslighting. It says that if you train a population for centuries to associate femininity with smallness, and you punish deviation, then the resulting behavior cannot be called choice. Let us grant the partial truth. Social pressure shapes behavior. No serious person denies this. But the essay performs a catastrophic leap from social pressure exists to women have no agency and everything they do is a product of patriarchal programming. If this were true, then women could not be held morally responsible for anything. Not their successes, not their failures, not their cruelties, not their lies, not their betrayals, not their false accusations, not their choices to abort their children, not their choices to divorce their husbands and take his children and his house. You cannot claim the crown of empowerment while hiding in the ragged cloak of determinism. You cannot demand equal pay, equal authority, equal political power, and equal moral standing while simultaneously insisting that every choice you make was forced upon you by an invisible system. Either women are moral agents with the capacity for choice, in which case their choices must be examined honestly, including the choices the essay wants to excuse, or women are passive receptacles of cultural programming, in which case they are not competent to hold the positions of authority the essay demands they be given. You cannot have both. The fork in the road is unavoidable, and every honest person knows which path leads to dignity. Here is the hidden premise the entire essay rests upon, the load-bearing assumption it never states, because stating it would expose the absurdity. Women are entitled to all the social, professional, and romantic rewards of life without enduring any of the natural friction, risk, trade-offs, or social costs that every human being has faced since the beginning of time. That is the premise. That is the buried engine. Every sentence in the essay, every accusation, every lyrical lament about shrinking and breathing room is an elaborate scaffolding erected to support that single unstated demand. Make the world frictionless for me. And if you do not, you are committing violence. But friction is not violence. Disagreement is not harm. A standard you did not meet is not a cage. A room that did not adjust to your preferences is not a crime scene. Every man who has ever lived has experienced rejection, failure, social penalty, economic loss, romantic invisibility, and the grinding daily reality of being measured against standards he did not design. He does not get to call this oppression. He calls it Tuesday. He gets up, goes to work, swallows the insult, endures the loss, and builds something anyway, because that is what men do, and that is what made everything you see around you possible. The essay deploys a textbook Mota and Bailey. The Mota is the easily defensible claim. Some women are tall. Sometimes women feel awkward. Social pressure exists. Women are sometimes judged more harshly for behavior that men are judged less harshly for. All true, all granted. The Bailey is the absurd expansion. Airline seats, door frames, fashion sample sizes, literary genres, prose styles, conflict styles, posture, salary negotiations, and the existence of the word no are all weapons in a civilizational war to erase the female form. You cannot defend the trivial observation to justify the cosmic accusation. You cannot retreat to women sometimes feel uncomfortable when challenged, and then advance to the entire built environment is a patriarchal assault on women's bodies when the coast is clear. That is not argument. That is a rhetorical shell game designed to make dissent impossible by making the claim unfalsifiable. I want you to hear something clearly. The essay is not liberating you. It is manufacturing a wound and then selling you the bandage. It takes the most powerful social skill set possessed by the human female, the capacity for relational attunement, emotional intelligence, conflict mediation, and social calibration, and tells you it is evidence of your victimization. It takes your natural mating instincts and tells you they are crimes committed against you. It takes your choices and tells you they are not yours. It takes your industry, your billion-dollar genre, your female-dominated publishing world, your social networks, your relational capital, your capacity for charm, your ability to read a room, your instinct for beauty, your drive for harmony, and tells you all of it is proof that you are a slave. This is not feminism. This is the manufacture of permanent grievance as a source of power, identity, and moral immunity. And the cost is not paid by the patriarchy. The cost is paid by you, by the woman who is taught to interpret her own strength as weakness, her own power as oppression, her own choices as cages, and her own nature as a disease. The cost is paid by the man who is told his sacrifice is invisible, His authority is tyranny. His protection is control. His provision is exploitation, and his grief is comedy. The cost is paid by the child who grows up in a home where the father has been legally and culturally exiled because a theory declared his presence structurally harmful. Over 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Family courts award sole or primary physical custody to mothers in the overwhelming majority of contested cases. Paternity fraud rates, while debated, are sufficient to destroy lives. And the male suicide rate, 3 to 4 times higher than female, in nearly every developed nation is met with institutional silence, so complete it constitutes its own indictment. You want to know what real empowerment looks like? It is not writing an essay about how oppressed you are by doorframes. It is the woman who builds a business, raises her children, masters her craft, honors her husband, and does not need a theory to explain her success or excuse her failure. It is the man who works the brutal job, comes home to his family, teaches his sons to be strong and his daughters to be virtuous, and does not ask the world to apologize for existing. It is the civilization that remembers who poured the foundation and does not spit on the builder while standing in the house. A sword does not apologize to the scabbard for requiring a sheath. And a civilization built by men who bore the infinite weight of the world does not owe an apology to the woman who was not handed a loud enough microphone. Stop apologizing for being male. Stop accepting the frame that your presence is violence, your authority is oppression, your sacrifice is invisible, and your silence is consent. Define your terms, hold the line, build the house, raise the sons. Protect the daughters. And when the propagandist tells you that your strength is her wound, look her in the eye and say, "No, my strength is your shelter." And you are welcome to stand in it or step out of it into the storm you keep insisting does not exist. But here is where the propagandist's trick must be laid bare, and the actual ledger of human suffering pulled into the light. I refuse that frame precisely because I have seen the cost it hides, a cost measured not in hurt feelings or slouched shoulders, but in male bodies stacked beneath the foundation of every comfortable abstraction the feminist dares to utter. The woman who writes about shrinking has never once considered the men who are consumed. So let us stop speaking in metaphors for a moment and consult the raw data, the unglamorous arithmetic of male disposability that no amount of narrative engineering can make disappear. The cost ledger of the invisible man, male shrinkage, and the debt of civilization. Let us speak plainly. The piece you just consumed is a triumph of emotional sleight of hand, cloaked in scholarly attire. It executes Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender on a societal level, mimicking a thief who convinces you the robbery was a present. The writer wants you to accept that women are the ones being systematically diminished in the modern West. Yet examine the actual toll of human loss. Men comprise over 93% of workplace deaths. Men are 3.5 times more prone to end their own lives. They represent nearly 4/5 of the homeless population. Young males are slipping behind in schooling at every stage, from primary classes through doctoral studies. Enrollment in universities has dropped for years, while females now secure roughly 57% of bachelor's diplomas. Still, against this backdrop of male decline, the feminist storyline claims the true sufferers are women who feel uneasy during conferences. The boldness needed to call male extinction a privilege in female unease, a tragedy demands, not mere ignorance, but a deep-seated theology of resentment. The article lists the social costs for women who refuse to comply. You'll be called difficult, shrill, ambitious in that warning tone. But let us examine the asymmetric burden of refusal for men. A woman who refuses to accommodate can still find a partner, still build a career, still be celebrated as a bold icon of empowerment. A man who refuses his biological and societal duty, who refuses to be the provider, the protector, the disposable soldier, the high-risk laborer, is labeled a deadbeat, an incel, a loser. He is stripped of his reproductive rights via child support laws that function as taxation without representation. He is left to die in the gutter of male homelessness, where shelters often turn him away because they only serve women and children. The cost of refusal for a man is not social awkwardness, it is existential annihilation. The feminist author demands we weep for the woman who pitches a project and is briefly perceived as aggressive, while ignoring the man who is imprisoned for failing to pay child support after losing his job. One of these is an inconvenience. The other is a cage. The article treats the female body as a blank slate, a passive victim of cultural inscription, ignoring the biological imperative that silently governs all human life. Women are not being shrunk by patriarchy when they take time off for pregnancy, childbirth, and nursing. They are responding to the teleology of their own form. To call this a patriarchal plot is to rebel against nature herself. The feminist wants you to believe that ambition is a universal good and that any interruption of it is oppression. But nature has a different curriculum. The woman who chooses to raise children is not a victim of architecture. She is participating in the most fundamental act of civilization. The real violence is the ideology that tells her this is a failure, that motherhood is a trap, that her value lies only in corporate advancement. The article demands that women be free from the constraints of biology, but freedom from nature is always slavery to appetite. The woman who aborts her child so she can pursue a corner office is not liberated. She has sacrificed the future for the present, and the culture that applauds her is a culture of death. The article obsesses over the tall woman's plight, the slouching, the flats, the social friction of towering over a male partner. But where is the essay for the short man? The man who is 5'5" and faces a dating market where 90% of women state a preference for men taller than them. The man whose height is a permanent mark of diminished status, whose romantic prospects are statistically crushed before he opens his mouth. Young men starve themselves, abuse steroids, and destroy their health in the gym to meet the exacting physical standards that women enforce with every swipe and every preference checkbox. The silent agony of the male body is the backdrop against which feminist body image complaints are staged. The tall woman can wear heels and reclaim her space. The short man cannot grow. He must accept that his body is a permanent liability, that he must compensate with money, status, or humor to be considered worthy of love. This is the body image hypocrisy at the heart of the feminist project. Female discomfort is a crisis. Male suffering is a punchline. The red-pilled man must aggressively reject the mantle of the oppressor that this article tries to drape over his shoulders. You do not owe a woman an apology for having a body, an ambition, or a voice. You owe her the truth that her shrinking is often a strategic performance designed to extract maximum benefit from the system she claims to oppose. The woman who slouches to appear smaller in a meeting is the same woman who demands a man 6 inches taller than her on Tinder. The woman who softens her language to avoid confrontation is the same woman who will eviscerate a man's reputation with a single social media post. The feminist narrative asks you to believe that women are powerless victims of male architecture, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Women initiate divorce in nearly 70% of cases. Women receive custody of children in over 80% of contested cases. Women are more likely to be believed when they make accusations regardless of evidence. The power dynamics of the modern West do not favor men, they favor women. And the article is a demand for even more unilateral advantage disguised as a cry for justice. Over 90% of workplace fatalities are men. Let that number sink into your bones. Men literally shrink their bodies into collapsed mines, flaming oil rigs, and wind-swept skyscrapers so that female authors can safely sit in climate-controlled apartments and type essays about how oppressive it is to be tall. The fishing industry, logging, roofing, steelwork, sanitation, these are the professions that build and maintain civilization, and they are overwhelmingly performed by men who die young, break their bodies, and are forgotten. The feminist article performs the ultimate act of ingratitude. It takes the sacrifice of millions of men as the unacknowledged infrastructure of its own existence, and then demands that those men apologize for the discomfort of the very women they protect. This is the disposable utility of the male. He is valued only insofar as he produces, and when he breaks, he is replaced. His death is an inconvenience. Her discomfort is a revolution. As women demand ever more room in every institution, male spaces are systematically invaded, litigated, and dismantled. Men's clubs, fraternities, even remote industrial jobs are subjected to quotas, sensitivity training, and hostile takeovers. The Boy Scouts, once a bastion of male mentorship, now admits girls. Men's support groups are monitored for toxic masculinity. The very concept of male association is pathologized as a conspiracy against women. But where are the female spaces being open to men? Where is the call for male inclusion in women's shelters, women's colleges, or feminist organizations? The demand for room is a one-way street. Men are crowded out of the public square, their natural desire for fraternity and competition recoded as dangerous. The result is a generation of isolated, atomized men who have no tribe, no initiation, no elders to teach them what it means to be a man. The feminist project has not liberated women, it has orphaned men. The family court system reduces a father from a revered patriarch and protector to a legal visitor and an ATM. This is the systematic shrinkage of male parental rights, a codified institutional injustice entirely ignored by those who cry over literary book genres. A father who works 60 hours a week to support his family will see his children 4 days a month if he's lucky, while the mother who abandons the home is presumed the nurturing parent. The article weeps for the woman who must soften her prose to be taken seriously in publishing. But it is silent on the father who must beg a judge for permission to see his own blood. This is the real architecture of shrinkage, the systematic erasure of the father from the life of his child, justified by a feminist jurisprudence that treats male parenthood as optional and female parenthood as sacred. The tall woman can buy heels. The divorced father cannot buy back the years he loses to a system that presumes his guilt before he enters the courtroom. I want you to hold that image in your mind, the woman in the climate-controlled apartment fretting over the patriarchal conspiracy of doorframe heights, while I place beside it another image. A man named Robert, 26, hanging from a safety harness 400 feet above the Columbia River, inspecting transmission lines in February wind that would strip paint off a car. Robert earns $31 an hour. He has a torn rotator cuff he cannot afford to fix because child support extracted by a family court machine that treats fatherhood as a financial obligation and a suspicion simultaneously consumes 42% of his after-tax income. He sees his children every other Saturday, supervised at a McDonald's whose corporate HR department has mandatory bias training but whose play place has no male staff because a man near children is a liability. Robert did not write a billion-dollar industry and then complain it lacks prestige. Robert did not slouch to make himself palatable. Robert went up the tower because someone had to keep the lights on for the woman typing about how the world was built too small for her body. The woman whose lights worked because a man's body was spent to make them. Consider this revelation that the feminist mind resists. If female compliance constitutes a systemic harm inflicted by men, it must stem from male intent to wound. Yet men gain no advantage from female neurosis, self-doubt, or shrinking, since these traits render interactions draining, inefficient, and corrosive to the domestic spheres men are wired to safeguard. Consequently, female accommodation is not an inflicted injury. It is an intersexual social tactic, a performance women stage for other women and for the mating Arnothy did not design but eagerly exploited, mistaken for oppression because labeling it as such buys moral immunity at zero cost. The writer does not crave liberty. Liberty is frightening. Liberty demands owning the fallout of your own decisions without a cosmic antagonist to blame for your dissatisfaction. She desires the prize of defiance without the expense of upheaval, the rank of the victimized minus the hassle of genuine victimization, and the voice of a thinker without the rigor required to process reality with clarity. You have been told your whole life that you are the problem, that your presence is pollution, that your voice is too loud, your ambitions are suspicious, your desires are predatory, your competence is a weapon, your fatherhood is a risk surface, and your suffering is scenery. You have been told that the civilization your forefathers bled into the soil to raise is actually a conspiracy against the women who live in its safest, warmest, most medicated, most liberated, most thoroughly coddled apartments in the history of the biological universe. I am telling you, it is a lie. It is a lie so vast and so flimsy that it collapses the moment one man with a clear eye and a steady voice stands up and says, "No, I was not built too large for the world." The world was built by men like me, and it stands because men like me still carry the weight. The men who built the roads and wired the cities and mined the ore and fought the wars and drafted the constitutions and codified the common law and raised the cathedrals and wrote the canon did not shrink. They stood to their full height, took the infinite weight of the world onto their shoulders and bled into the earth so that others could breathe. You owe no apology for the air she is breathing. You built the lungs of the world she takes it for granted in. Now you know the grammar of the trick. You can see the mechanism. You can name the fallacy, audit the cost ledger, expose the gamma bias, sex swap the claim, and watch the entire architecture of grievance collapse into the pile of resentful sophistry it always was. You are not NPC zombies marching to the beat of someone else's ideological drum. You are men. You have agency, reason, a lineage of greatness stretching back to the first man who struck flint to iron and refused to freeze. So go forth. Speak the truth without flinching. Build the institutions that honor what men actually are. Defend fatherhood, demand due process, count the male cost, refuse the guilt, and never again confuse the woman's complaint for a moral verdict on your existence. The truth has been spoken. It does not need their permission. It needs your voice to carry it. Sponsored book, The Anti-Feminist Manifesto, A Man's Guide to Freedom and Strength. You're holding this book because you've had enough. You're tired of being told to sit down, shut up, and apologize for existing as a man. You're fed up with the endless accusations, the double standards, and the constant feeling that no matter what you do, it's never enough. You're not alone. I've been there too. I've felt the sting of being called toxic, simply for standing my ground. I've been trapped in arguments where every word I said was twisted into proof of my guilt. I've watched as my sacrifices as a man, my time, my energy, my blood, sweat, and tears were dismissed as irrelevant or worse, expected as my duty. This book is my answer to that. It's a battle cry for men who refuse to be silenced, who refuse to be shamed, and who refuse to live as second-class citizens in a society that seems hell-bent on erasing them. This book is not for everyone. If you're someone who believes that men are the root of all evil, that masculinity is inherently toxic, or that the world would be better off without us, then put this book down now. Go read something else. Knit a sweater. Take up gardening. Do whatever makes you happy, because this book isn't for you. But if you're a man who's tired of being told to apologize for your existence, if you're tired of being trapped in endless cycles of guilt and shame, if you're ready to reclaim your identity and your power, then keep reading. This book is for you. I've spent years studying the ways in which modern feminism and social justice movements have turned men into villains. I've seen how these ideologies use guilt, shame, and manipulation to control and silence men. I've watched as men are stripped of their dignity, their strength, and their ability to lead, and I've had enough. In this book, I'll show you how to break free from these traps. I'll teach you how to identify the lies and manipulations that have been used against you. I'll give you the tools to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, and to reclaim your masculinity. This isn't about hating women or rejecting equality. It's about recognizing that the current system is broken, and it's about giving men the tools they need to fix it. You'll learn how to navigate the Kafka traps that keep you silent and powerless. You'll discover the truth about feminist ideology and how it's been used to control and manipulate men. You'll learn how to set boundaries and stand up for yourself without fear of backlash. You'll explore the historical roots of male oppression and how to break free from it. And you'll find out how to build a life where your male identity is celebrated, not demonized. This book is not just a collection of ideas. It's a roadmap to freedom. It's a guide to reclaiming your strength, your confidence, and your identity as a man. If you're ready to stop apologizing for who you are, if you're ready to take back control of your life, then this book is for you. Turn the page and let's get started. Your freedom is waiting. The Anti-Feminist Manifesto, A Man's Guide to Freedom and Strength, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.